right, today's lesson is on angles. Shh. This video works better when you don't talk over it. An angle on the coordinate plane is in standard form when the vertex is at the origin and one ray lies on the positive x-axis. So when you draw an angle, you can also think of it as a xy, and so the ray on the x-axis is called the initial side. The other ray where it ends is called the terminal side. Do you know if you go clockwise or counterclockwise, it results in positive angle measures? And if you go clockwise, it results in negative angle measures. The most common unit of measure for angles is in degrees. A degree is equivalent to 1/360th of a full rotation. So if you take one rotation and break it up into 360 pieces of pie, 1 degree is that, 1/360th of a full rotation. Do you see this on the left? Think of this as your compass, right? North, south, east, west. But it's the compass using degrees. So if you go straight up, the angle is 90. Straight left, it's 180. Straight down, it's 270. And then back to the beginning, it's 360. This is well worth your attention. Now, without a protractor, we're going to draw these angles. You ready? Can you sketch an angle that's given in standard position? So we know in standard position, it starts with the positive x-axis. Do you know that I'm going to talk about quadrants? Do you remember how we number quadrants? We start in the top right and we count 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I ask you, what quadrant is 65 in? You'd say quadrant number, is it closer to 90 or 0? Because 45 would be in the middle. So can you sketch an angle that's a little closer to 90, and it's okay if it's off a little? Do you know what quadrant it's in? Do you know if it's closer to 90 or 0? And then what's the last thing I need to do? I have to measure it. Let's try the next one. What quadrant is 320 in? Look over here, right? See over here? 320 is between 270 and 360. Do you know if it's closer to 360 or 270? It's a little closer. It's darn in the middle. Do you know the angle that's in the middle of the fourth quadrant is 315? So 320, you draw it pretty darn close to the middle. And then what would you do? How do you measure it? What direction? Counterclockwise, like you're drawing a circle, right? And then where does the arrow end? At the terminal side. Let's keep going. Number 3. Do you know how to measure the angle 415? What would be wise to do first on the side? Subtract 360? So if you subtract one rotation, what's left over? I get 55. Did you get 55? Which quadrant is 55 in? 1, 2, 3, or 4? And it's just a little bit closer to 90. So can you approximate 55? It's close to the middle, a little closer to 90. And then, most importantly, how do I measure it? Well, 415, you have to show one rotation, and then where does it end? And again, what direction did the rotation go? Counter clockwise. Do you see how I went more than once? And then ended at the terminal side. Hey, negative 140. I'm going to do you a favor. You ready? In the margin, we're going to draw a set of axes. This is going to be the negative one. Do you know if you go straight down, it's negative 90? Straight left is negative 180. Do you know it's negative 180, positive 180, or coterminal? Straight up would be negative 270, and then back to the beginning would be negative 360. The quadrants are counted the same way. 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't change the direction of the quadrants. They are locked in. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I ask you what quadrant is negative 140 in, what would you tell me? In quadrant number 3, and pretty close to the middle, right? Negative 135 would be exactly in the middle. So can you draw it in the middle? And then what direction do we go when we measure that angle? What quadrant's negative 15 in? Negative 15. What quadrant are we in? Quadrant number 4. Barely, right? Teeny weeny, right there, right? And then you draw a little angle for negative 15 that's going clockwise. Okay, negative 210. Which quadrant is negative 210 in? And negative 210 is a little closer to negative 180. So it's in quadrant number 2, but closer to negative 180. And again, what direction do you measure? Like you're drawing a circle? And can you go clockwise there? All right, that was some work on understanding angles, right? Now the big number 2 part of the lesson. Big. There is a second unit of measurement to measure the size of an angle. So instead of degrees, we're now going to learn about radians. So because most of you have never heard of a radian, here we go. A radian is actually made up of 2 words. You ready? The first word is the word radius, and the second word is the word angle. If you take radius and angle and you put them together, the word you get is radian. So where does the word radian come from? Radius and angle, mash them together, and you get the word radian. It's an angle made with the radius. It's an angle made with the radius. Now, 1 radian. Do you know that a radius is the same length no matter what direction you go? So in standard position, that's the radius, yes? If I draw another radius, it's the same length. If you draw the second radius, so the arc is the same length. So all 3, like an equilateral, yes? The angle that's made with that equilateral, that's really a piece of pie, is called 1 radian. So if I draw 2 radii, and the arc is the same length as the radii, the angle that's made with that radius is called a radian. I know, spinny. But, big idea, it's an angle made with the radius, yes? An angle made with the radius. That's why it's called a radian. It connects us to circles and radius. A lot of trigonometry connects us to circles. All right. Now, one of the things we need to know is, I need to know how to convert between the 2. If I asked you, what distance is it from here to Los Angeles? You could say the distance is 200 miles. Or you could say it's a different unit of measurement. How many kilometers is it? It's about 300 kilometers, right? Are both correct? Yes, just a different unit of measurement. So it's important to know how to change between the 2. Yes? Do you know how many miles are in a kilometer? Do you know how many kilometers are in a mile? So there's about 0.6 miles in 1 kilometer. But there's a ratio, right, to multiply times to convert. So, same is true here. 360 degrees is equal to 2 pi radians. And 180 degrees is equal to 1 pi radian. Do you know the symbol for degrees is a little circle? When it's in radians, almost all the time, we don't have a symbol like RAD. Instead, if the answer has a pi in it, it's considered to be in radians. If you don't have a pi in the answer, then it's considered to be in degrees with that little circle. So do you see pi here? Do you know what pi is again? Pi is when you take the circumference of a circle and divide it by its diameter. What is pi again? The circumference of a circle divided by its diameter, and we know it's about 3.14. We're never going to use 3.14. We're just going to say pi. But what's pi again? The circumference divided by the diameter. And it's about 3, right, every time you do it. So we're going to keep pi in our answer. So how do I convert one way or the other? So if I have radians, I'm going to go pi over 180 times the degrees. If I have degrees, I'm going to do the reciprocal to go in the other direction. So in degrees, radians times 180 over pi. So we're going to practice is can you convert? And I'm going to let you use your calculator, if you have it. So, step number 1 is if you have degrees, can you convert it to radians? And to convert it to radians, we're going to multiply by pi over 180. So, I'm going to take my calculator. I'm going to go 60. So the more you listen, the easier the video is, and you'll learn something. Do you know where pi is on your calculator? So it's in blue. Can you see it in blue right here? So you have to press. You have to press the blue button and then the arrow. Yes. And then a fraction is just the divide sign, and then 180. Now, do not go diamond enter. Just go enter. And then what's the answer? Done. So, 60 degrees, keep listening, try. 60 degrees is the same as pi over 3 radians. And if pi is in your answer, it's assumed it's in radian. 8. How do I convert? What do I multiply times? Pi over 180. Use your calculator. Again, don't go diamond enter. And what's the answer? 8 pi over... Most of the time we're going to use our calculator. Some of the time we're not in this unit. Got it? Most of the time yes. Some of the time no. Okay? Be wise to bring it. 330. What do I multiply it times? Pi over 180. Use your calculator. So 330. And then pi over 180. Oh, what did I do wrong? Just answer. So it's 11 pi over 6. And usually you put pi in the numerator. You could put pi beside the fraction, but most of the time you're going to see pi in the numerator and not beside the fraction. I agree. You need a new calculator. There's error. So we need to go to the library and replace it with a nice one. So take out the batteries, and then we'll do that, okay? Is that cool? And you can even write yourself a pass to the library, okay? All right. Hey.
Where do we put the batteries?
Keep them. You're going to want them for the new one you get, right? Negative 45 degrees. What do I multiply it times? Pi over 180. Use it. What's the only issue in negative or positive? Just your answer is going to have a negative in front of the fraction. And again, most of the time for radians, you're going to have fractions. Not always, but most of the time. This is negative pi over 4. So again, how do you convert? Times pi over 180. And if it's negative, it's just a negative in front of the fraction. And again, how do you convert? Pi over 180, the answer is negative. And it's 5 pi over 12. All right, let's go to the next step, which is, can you convert the other direction? So, if you have radians. Now, number 13, how do you know it's in radians? Because what's in the number? Pi. Now, if I want to convert the other way, I do the reciprocal. What does that mean? Not pi over 180, but... Now, how am I going to remember which one is which one? You ready? How am I going to remember it? And the answer is, when the answer is in degrees, will pi be in the answer? So guess what happens when pi is in the denominator? What happens to these pi's? And you won't have it, right? Can you see how you're going to remember? So 180 over pi, the pi's will cross out. So when you type it in your calculator, you don't need to put pi in. Just 5 times divided by equals 5 times 180 divided by 18. So what angle is that in degrees? Now for this one, we do need a little donut there. So it's not just 50, but it needs the symbol. So it's 50 degrees. Keep going. What do I do with 11 pi over 9 to convert it? 180 over, what happens to the pi's always? Right? So what do you put in your calculator? 11 times 180 divided by 9. $220. Did you get 220? Keep practicing. 180 over pi. So in your calculator, the pi's divide out. So we have 7 times 180 divided by 3. 420. 16. If you have negative radians, it just means the degree is going to be negative. So again, what do I multiply it times? Pi over 180. What's 1 times 180 divided by 6? So it's just 180 divided by 6. So the angle is negative 30. Again, convert 180 over pi. The pi's divide out. Negative 19 times 180 divided by 12. One more time. Can you convert? 180 over pi. Pi's divide out, and the answer is negative 135 degrees. All right, here's the last part of the lesson, understanding coterminal angles. What did we already say coterminal means before the video? Two angles that share the same. So two angles that share the same terminal side. Now the key number here is going to be either 360 or if it's in radians, 2 pi. That's because the old joke, if you go 360, you end up exactly where you were, right? That's coterminal, 360. Or in radians, 360 is 2 pi. All right, let's go back to 19. How will I know if they are coterminal? Take the smaller angle, and what are you going to add to it to see if they're coterminal? If you add 360, what should the answer be? If it's not 305, they are not coterminal. So what's the magic number you're adding or subtracting? 360. So what's 360 and negative 55? That means they are. So if you add 360 and you get the same answer, right, that means both of these. If you would draw these angles, they would look exactly the same until you measured it. Yes? Number 20. How will I know if they're coterminal? What am I going to add? Okay, take the smaller angle and add 360. What do you get? Negative 170 plus 360. Use your calculator. What do you get? 190? Is they the same? Now, is pi over 4, is that in degrees? Is pi over 4 in degrees? It's in what? Radians. Is that brand new for today, right? So the indicator is pi in the number, it's in radians. So we're not going to use 360. Instead, we're going to use 2 pi. What's negative 9 pi over 4 plus 2 pi? So if I went negative 9 pi over 4 plus 2 pi, does that equal positive pi over 4? Now, you might have to add 2 pi again to see if it matches. But if I add 2 pi again, will it match? No, right? So are they coterminal? Number 22. How will I tell if they're coterminal? What am I going to add? Okay, so I'm going to go negative 5 pi over 2. And I'm going to add 2 pi. Do they match? No, but what could you add again to see if they match? So you keep doing that until it goes over the other angle, right? Bigger. So if I add 2 pi again, what happens? Does it now match? These are coterminal. So you might have to add 2 pi more than once and see if they match. If you add 2 pi or 360 and it goes over the number you're looking for, then you know it's not coterminal. But if they match, they're coterminal. All right, here we go. 23, last part of the lesson. Can you give one positive angle and one negative angle that's coterminal? If I want a positive angle, what am I going to add that's coterminal? 360. If I want a negative angle, I'm not going to add. Instead, I'm going to subtract. Again, I'm allowing you to use your calculator. $150 is coterminal to both. If you would draw these angles, they'd look exactly the same until you measured them. So if you want coterminal, you either add 360 or subtract 360. 265, add 360 or subtract 360. Oh, that's not going to work. The other way. That's negative 95. Is that right? Yeah. add 360 or subtract 360? Oop. Where did that come from? Well, if it's in radians, it's not 360 but 2 pi. Can you add 2 pi? And to pi over 12, can you subtract 2 pi? If you didn't have a calculator, you'd need common denominators. Again, we're going to add 2 pi. If you didn't have a calculator, you'd need common denominators. The denominator under 2 pi is 1. That's 19 pi over 6. Or subtract. All right, last one. And then you know what your quiz is on. So we're going to add 2 pi. That's 25 pi over 18. And we're going to subtract. All right, Mr. G Math, over and out. There's your lesson on angles, radians, degrees.